Why did HYBE insist on forcing the release of Jin's solo album right on the same day as the intensive shooting schedule with Kian's bizarre BNB team? Is this just a coincidence, or is there a hidden strategy that was deliberately designed without considering Jin's condition? And is it true that some of the internal staff began to divulge the truth because they could not stand HYBE's inhumane rules anymore? What is really going on behind the silence of this huge company, and will a major conflict explode? Do you also feel that there is something unusual about the atmosphere surrounding Jin these days? For some reason, her smile no longer felt as warm as before. His gaze was blank behind the camera, and his silence, too deep to be taken for granted. But perhaps the silence was an inaudible scream, the scream of someone being forced to stand on two stages at once, an art stage and a commercial stage. And finally, a shocking news broke out from behind the walls of HYBE meeting. A whisper from the internal staff, which is not just a rumor, but perhaps the key to understanding why Jin's album was delayed, and who exactly is to blame. Imagine yourself in Jin's shoes, in the midst of intense rehearsals, under the pressure of preparing an album that will be remembered as his first big solo step. Suddenly, an order appears to appear at a major variety show with Kian's team. The same day, in non-negotiable times. And when a request for a delay arose from the genie's side, instead of being approved, it was unilaterally rejected by the management. Why is it that HYBE doesn't seem to want to give Jin any breathing space? And who will explain to the public if the end result does not live up to expectations? For months, the army had suspected that something was being hidden. Even in the video teasers, Jin's aura looks different. There was no energy typical of him, no spirit that used to overflow from his every word and gesture. Only the silence seemed entrenched. And now, whispers from some of the staff have finally confirmed that this isn't all paranoia. Yes, some of the production staff, who, it is said, have long harbored irritation due to unreasonable work rules, began to divulge this harsh reality to the inner circle. They witnessed for themselves how Jin's schedule was scrambled, just for the sake of a release date that he said was strategic for the market. But who really benefits? The date HYBE chose as the moment for the release of Jin's album turned out to be not an arbitrary day. It was the day when Jin was supposed to focus on going through the full shoot for Team Kian's bizarre BNB program, a show that demands not only physical, but also emotional energy. Not only featuring Jin as a star, the show was also designed to show a side of his personality that is rarely exposed. But what if, on the same day, he had to undergo a major album promotion? What was HYBE thinking? Did this company really not realize that putting two heavy loads in the same day would create a behind-the-scenes explosion? The decision not only made Jin's schedule a mess, but also overwhelmed the crew on set. According to one of the staff, who did not want to be named, a small conflict had occurred at the location. Jin came in a very tired state, barely able to complete the shooting process. And, even more astonishingly, he had to stop in the middle of the session just to record a short promotional message about his new album. Some of the crew were reportedly annoyed not at the genie, but at the system that put the artist in such an impossible position. One of the staff even said in a frustrated tone, "We are not machines, and genies are not robots." Will this be a turning point in the relationship between Jin and HYBE? Or will all this again be shrouded in silence as usual? What makes the heart even heavier is the fact that the postponement of Jin's album was never explained transparently to the public. There was no official statement saying that the release date should have been earlier, no clarification on why the album teaser appeared and then suddenly disappeared from the radar. Now, with the emergence of leaked information from staff who began to dare to speak up, we began to be able to put together a puzzle that had been trying to hide. And the last piece of that puzzle is so inhumane. Another surprise? Some sources say that HYBE's final decision not to delay the release of Jin's album was actually opposed by some of their own internals. There was a long debate going on in the boardroom. Several senior managers were said to be trying to fight for Jin's time off, but their voices were lost by pressure from the marketing division that was already putting together a massive campaign by that release date. They refuse to change all promotional timelines just for the sake of one artist. For the sake of a genie who has given so much to the agency, but is now treated as if it's just part of the commercial calendar. What can we expect from a company that makes no room for humanity? The question now is, will the genie remain silent? Or could this be the beginning of a match in silence? Some ARMY believe that the genie is preparing something not just a masterpiece, but perhaps also a statement. An honesty that will not be silenced by the camera lens or the script of the show. And perhaps, if this pressure continues, Jin will choose a surprising path. A path that will not only shake the ARMY, but also shake HYBE from within. I ask this the reason why Jin seems more moody in all his appearances lately? Is this also why his interactions with other BTS members seem shorter, more formal, more discreet? Is he hiding a deep disappointment, or is he preparing a final outburst? Clearly, the ARMY is not standing still. The hashtags #ProtectJin and #HYBE Explain This have now begun to resonate on various platforms, although not yet as big as the previous scandal. But if the voices of the internal staff continue to emerge, and if HYBE continues to choose silence, this wave of protest could turn into a storm. And when the storm came, there was nothing more to hide. Not by HYBE, and not by anyone. And here we are, standing on the threshold of a truth that has been covered with layers of industrial propaganda. To the public, Jin seemed fine. But is it really like that? Or is what we see just the result of engineering from carefully arranged camera angles? The fans began to question everything. Why was Jin never given the space to directly explain his feelings about his own album release schedule? Why is the only source of information is a generic press release from the HYBE, who seem to underestimate the creative process of an artist? A source mentioned that Jin has actually made a formal request to management to review the release schedule, even proposing a compromise. Just move a day or two from the date that clashed with the shooting of Kian's /B. However, as the staffer who leaked this information said, HYBE was already too deep into the marketing campaign at that date. They did not want to lose momentum, although they had to sacrifice the comfort of the artist. The statement created a domino effect among fans. Does this mean that HYBE is more concerned with numbers and statistics than the mental health of their artists? Jin's silence is not just about professionalism. He's not just trying to be an adult. For the few ARMY who knew him well, Jin's silence was the quietest form of protest. He does not hit the table, does not make scandals, does not disassemble anything frontally. But his silence, the look in his eyes, even the way he answered questions with a slight smile, all of that is now being reread by fans who are slowly understanding. Jin is under enormous pressure, and he is not doing well. Especially when you see how Jin on the set of Kian's /B looks exhausted, unlike his usual self. Someone who was originally known as a mood maker now looks like he is holding something back. Behind his thin jokes,